Hello to you from wherever you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast. My name is Tracy Cavavito, and this is Refined for the Mind. Today, on this episode of Refined for the Mind, we are going to be talking about identity. I know that you're thinking to yourself, what is there to know about identity? And you're racking your brain and thinking, what is she going to tell me about identity? There's a lot to explore about identity, but today I'll be talking about understanding who you are. So I pose the question to you. Who are you on a deeper level, beyond your name, beyond your culture, beyond what society has told you about who you are, beyond what your friends say about who you are? Who are you? Although these different parts of life make up who we are, I believe that we are so much more than the pressures of society. We're so much more than the tags that we've been given. We are so much more. And we need to discover those parts of ourselves every day. So I ask you again, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are beyond your job title? Do you know who you are beyond how you show up in the world, let's say, as a sister, as a mother, as a brother, you name it, as a father? Do you know who you are? Let's explore identity and understand what identity is. Identity. Identity is being what or who a thing or person is. Notice how identity says nothing about doing, it says more about being. And I think because we're constantly caught up in the world of doing things, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that, being can feel very difficult. And so today I want us to understand those parts of ourselves that make us who we are, even when we don't pay attention to them. So, some of the questions you want to ask yourself about identity is, where do I derive my identity? I'll tell you for sure. If you belong to a religious community, there might be a form of identity tied to that. If you belong to a certain work organization, there'll be an identity tied to that. There'll be a form of identity tied to family. There'll be a form of identity tied to friendships. There'll be a form of identity tied to perhaps the schools that you went to. And most importantly, the things that you learned in your initial stages of development as a child. What are those things that you constantly had, in your home? What are the things, what are the ideas that were passed on to you that you never picked out these ideas, you never chose these ideas were enforced onto you, or they were passed on to you, and as a child, because you're very impressionable, you took on these beliefs as your own. And so the purpose of this is to awaken to those beliefs, those ideas that we were taught while we were still younger, while we were still impressionable, before we could make our own decisions, and before we realized that, we have the power to actually mold our lives into what we want them to be. And so that's what we will explore today. We will explore where you derive your identity. And I want us to think about what our beliefs do to us. So when you actually take the time to explore who you are, when you start asking the questions like, what really makes me happy? What are the things that set my soul on fire? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the things that I'm really good at? If I could take care of myself and give myself everything that I want, who would I be and what would I be? But most importantly, it's also a question of, if nobody else existed in the world except me, who would I be? And I think about this in relation to what I do as an actor. So whenever you get a character, you are asked to give the character a background, where they grew up, the schools that they went to, the beliefs they have, the ideas that they have, the motivations that they have to do whatever it is that they do. And in doing this kind of work, we kind of then build a whole new human being, even beyond what the writers have given you. This is you fleshing out the character. So I recognize that in some ways, not even in some ways, I want to believe that actors truly are like people who embody these. They're the people who are able to actually take on the responsibility of being other human beings. And it's not a small responsibility. But in that sense, acting has also taught me about the fact that we are constantly changing our identities. Actors can become a lot of things. And so in that sense, I want you to think of identity as something that is adaptive, something that's evolving, something that is changeable. But the thing about not knowing who you are is that you then sit with the beliefs that you've probably taken on without thinking about how they affect you and how you approach life and how you think about different things and how you relate to other human beings. So it's your thoughts, it's your feelings, it's your actions. And so sometimes you'll find people doing things that are probably not favorable to the general collective, but then they'll tell you, but this is who I am. It's not who you are, it's who you've chosen to be. And I want us to explore how you can become adaptive, how you can change those notions of the things that you constantly say, oh, this is who I am. That's not who you are. And today we're going to discover how to do that. So, in awakening to who you are, it means you have to pose questions, a kind of sophisticated understanding to your thinking in order to go to the bottom of the barrel, to find out what's at the bottom. Why do I act the way that I do? Why do I think the way that I do? Why do I feel like this? It's very easy to say things like, oh, I think I'm this, or I'm feeling like this, or whatever it is that you constantly replay in your life. It's very easy to limit it to something like, oh, I this is how I am, or I think like this, and I cannot change that. That is not true. I believe that if we get to the bottom of why we believe the things that we believe and who taught us the things that we believe, then we really start to explore who we are. That way, when you're in a space and you're acting a certain way, you're aware, oh my God, I'm doing this because this is what I was taught to do. Oh my God, I'm intolerant of this human being because it's um I'm intolerant of this human being because I was taught that this kind of human being and I cannot coexist in the same space. Or the next time you're constantly in a loop of negative thoughts, you catch yourself and you're like, oh, I'm doing that thing again where I think so low of myself. So today we have to look at exploring those beliefs, those self limiting stories that we tell about ourselves to other people and to ourselves. You refuse yourself to step out of your comfort zone or to do something that's scary because you just think to yourself, I'm never going to be able to do that. That's a lie. And I like how Jim Quick puts it. He says it's a limited idea entertained, a lie. And because it's a lie, it's good that it's important for you to get to the bottom of it. Where did it come from? And is there evidence to support what it is that you're saying? And most likely, usually you will find that there's actually no evidence to support the things that you say about yourself. Whether these things are good or bad things, you will find that sometimes we have either an inflated image of who we are, or sometimes we are shrinking who we are just to fit into certain spaces. And so, what do our beliefs do to us? I want us to explore what our beliefs do to us. There's something that I recently learned about, something called covering. When you find yourself existing within a space with different people, and let's say in your workspace, you're a completely different person. When you're at home, you're a completely different person. When you're with yourself, you're a completely different person. With your friends, you're a different person. Now, in as much as I understand that there's a place for this in society, you have to understand that there's some parts of you that should be consistent across all these different spheres of your life. There's some parts of you that you shouldn't have to cover up in order to fit into a certain group. Because the truth is, if you're doing certain things to fit into a certain group, if you're creating a fictional character to fit into a certain group, then you're not really fitting in. You're not even able to create meaningful bonds. You're not able to relate with other people because you're being so unreal and you're being contrary to who you are. It's very easy that you will also see those things in other people. You will look at people and be suspicious of them, not trusting of them. And so it's important for you to be aware of things like that. Oh, when I'm around my workmates, this is how I act, and when I'm around my friends, this is who I am. My family, this is the version of me that they get. And I don't think that we should always be creating those cracks, unless, of course, you're a person who's obnoxious and you recognize that within the workspace, perhaps this will not work, or you're a person who tends to be very blunt and very cold. Then you realize that I need to work on this aspect of who I am in order to actually allow other people to relate with me. But if the parts of you that you're hiding are maybe that you're afraid of telling people you struggle with anxiety or depression, then you're somewhat creating a stigma within yourself. You're telling yourself that it's not okay for you to suffer from depression. You're telling yourself it's not okay for me to be anxious, because then the rest of society might deem me a little bit too delicate. People might not be able to give me jobs, or people might not be able to scale me up in my workspace because, oh, she suffers from anxiety and depression. You're hiding yourself. And what you're communicating to your body and to your mind is that you're not enough and you're not able to exist the way that you are, no matter how you are, which I think is it's a very limited way of seeing ourselves, and it creates crevices within us that then start to tarnish who we are on the inside. What does it cost you? What does it cost you to gain the entire world and lose yourself? I think back to a time when I myself was doing something like this. I experienced an identity crisis in the year 2021. I was completely losing it. Um, I was the kind of person who really identified myself a lot with what I did for work. I love my work. I love what I do for work. Anything that I do, I want to pour my soul, my heart into it. And so that's what I did with my first acting job. For those of you who are hearing my voice for the very first time, I will give you a small backstory of what happened, or a short backstory. So what happened was I always knew that acting is something that I wanted to do, but I never even took the time to maybe explore it through books or anything. I had acted in school, and that's all I knew, that, it's something that I was good at, that I knew that it's something that I would thrive in, and I just didn't see a future doing it. But then, of course, 2020 came along, and then we were all forced into this collective awakening of our consciousness. All of us were forced into spaces that, we had never imagined would be, and we were all locked up in our homes. Nothing. I mean, there were people who were still working, but then for the most part, most of the world was on lockdown or in lockdown. And so during this time, I started to explore my being. The year before that, I had started to do that, but then now I started to do the work really deeply. I started to understand that the one thing I was really running from was the one thing that I was really going to do so well. And I'm saying this, and then it almost like brings tears to my eyes, because it was like an aha moment. It's like, oh, you've been running from this thing, but this is the one thing that you will do really well. So in 2021, I took a chance on myself and said I would do acting. In doing acting, however, I lost myself so completely in the role that I was playing. And of course, because you're interacting with people from different walks of life, you're about 100 people on a set shooting. So you find that sometimes you have to mold yourself in a certain way to appease certain people. And I use the word appease very carefully, but it is what it is, because most of us are constantly creating fictional characters. So you kind of plant different images in different people's minds. Certain people perceive you a certain way, and other people perceive you another way. But away from that, in becoming this character, I did not realize how much I abandoned who I was, the things that made me happy, the things that strengthened me as a person, the things that made up the things that made Tracy who she is. And of course, it came to a crucial point in time where both these people were at loggerheads with each other. They could not coexist with each other because they all had different ideals. And if you know the character, you know that if you know the character and you know a bit about me, you would know that me and the character I played were two completely different beings. She had a lot to teach me, by the way. I'm so grateful that I got to be Sanyu. I'm grateful that I got to be that girl, because she taught me a lot about humility. She taught me a lot about, letting things be as they are. And then you would have to meet Tracy, who was a tad bit assertive at the time, and she's a bit of a rebel, and she kind of just doesn't let people tell her what to do and whatnot. So now you find these two characters were conflicting with each other, and I had an identity crisis. I was so immersed in playing a character, and now it came to a point where I needed to be Tracy, and the character was pushing back on Tracy's ideals. And so I wasn't sure, who am I? Am I the character or am I Tracy? And yet the situation or the decision that I needed to make was very important for where I wanted to go as a person in my career. when I went through that, and especially walking away from my work, it left me feeling so empty because I did not realize how much I had abandoned in the pursuit of my dreams. One, I was a person who was obviously always health conscious. So I'm the person who's working out or doing yoga or meditating. But for this entire period, think 100 episodes, entire period of shooting 100 episodes, I'm not doing any of these things. I'm inconsistently showing up for myself because I need to be my best for whoever this character is. And I recognize now, of course, in retrospect, that perhaps that's what that moment of of my life needed. And at the time, I'm in talking to this about other actors. They said, I think you were doing method acting at the time, and you were not aware of it. And now I know that that's what I was doing. And so that that situation, that moment forced me to really start paying attention to who I am. I started to ask a lot of questions because I wanted to know, where did I go wrong, what is it that I've learned within this space that has made me fracture who I am, or made me feel that who I am is not enough. And how can I then balance it out next time when I decide to take on a role? How can I make sure that all the parts of me are still showing up? And how can I make sure that I see this as work and then be able to step away from it when I need to? So that it's not a thing of I'm completely changing my character. Because you see, the mind and the body do not know what's real and what's fake. If I started to breathe really fast right now, I could lose my breath. And in my mind is thinking she's probably anxious, or she's getting a panic attack, or she's having an emotional breakdown. My mind and my body do not know what's real. And for anybody listening to this who's probably an actor, they will tell you that that is true. We have a tendency to put our minds in an imaginative state where we actually believe the experiences that the character is going through within that moment, and then we leave them out. So, however, in looking at it, I wouldn't want to exist like this in the world. I wouldn't want to be one way with another person and be another way with another person. I want who I am to be almost always consistent. Not even almost, I want it to be consistent. My values, what do I stand for? And I'm asking you the same question. What is it that you stand for? Because you have to stand for something. There must be something about you that you cannot compromise. There must be things about your being that you cannot compromise. You think to yourself and say, if I compromise this, then it makes me, it doesn't make me feel good about who I am. So you have to get really clear about those things. In that way, you're also communicating boundaries to other people. And so when we do not communicate our boundaries to people, then we get mad at them for we get mad at them for not respecting those boundaries. It's like one of those things where you have expectations of someone, but you've not communicated the expectations. So the expectations are within your own mind. And everybody else around you is like, why is she so mad? Or why is he so mad at me? And so in doing this, in understanding yourself, you will know what things you are intolerant of. You will know what things you're okay with. You will know who you are. You will know the beliefs that you have and why you have those beliefs. You will know your values. You will know your strengths and your weaknesses. In that way, if you understand these different facets of who you are, then you know how to show up in the world. You stop spending energy and time on things that do not actually grow you. You start working on the things that you actually want to change about your life. And you start confronting those things that are very uncomfortable, the uncomfortable truths about you. And it's just really about going within. But of course, this is not the only way that, we can know who we are. It's not only through self-examination. And we're going to explore that in a bit. But I want us to get into exploration, of who we are. How do we come to understand who we are? I started to understand who I was by writing. I know that seems like something that's so far-fetched for a lot of you. A lot of people that I've spoken to always say, man, I'm not a writer. Listen, this has nothing to do with being a writer. This has nothing to do with being perfect in what you put down on paper. This has a lot to do with letting your stream of consciousness flow on the paper. So how do you explore who you are? You ask questions, self-exploration, and this can be done through journaling. But you have to do this when you're in a state of calm. It's not just, oh, I've listened to the podcast today and you know what, I want to explore right now. I want to ask myself the questions. And I am going to attach resources of what kind of questions you can ask yourself. Because a lot of people also say, I don't journal because I don't know what to say when I start writing. When you ask questions, you get better answers. And sometimes you have to keep asking a question again and again so that you can examine that, the things that you're writing are actually grounded in the truth. The purpose of this is to awaken what lies at the bottom of what we call the unconscious. And I like what my teacher Essen Goenka says. He says, we like to call it the unconscious, but in fact it's not unconscious. It is conscious at all times, even when you sleep. So sometimes that's why if you're experiencing a bit of strife in your life, you'll notice that your dreams reflect that much as well. Or if you're experiencing some sort of uncertainty and with your feelings or with your thinking, this is how you show up even in the spaces that you're occupying, in the places that you're supposed to be taking space in. The purpose of this is to get really clear in there, because many of us are not taught how to use our mind. And yet I believe that your mind is the greatest tool that you have. Your mind is powerful. And once you start to understand how powerful your mind is, you will understand why certain patterns keep replaying, why you keep repeating certain habits, why you keep finding yourself in the same situation. Say you're dating somebody and then that relationship ends. But before you can even examine what's happening there, you're in for another relationship already. And guess what? The history is repeating itself. It's because you haven't taken the time to actually understand what happened here and how it has influenced what's happening here. And so we want to get out of that constant loop of doing the same things over and over again, because there's no way for you to change what you're not aware of. You can only change what you're aware of. If, in order for this exercise to actually be very helpful for you, you have to get rid of all suppression, and you have to just get rid of it. Suppression and repression cannot work. You have to be totally and completely honest with yourself. This is not those self-assessment things where they say very likely or likely not to. No, this one deals with you actually allowing your thoughts to come onto the paper. Or if you're afraid that, someone might pick up your journal and read it, then by all means, every phone now has a notes application. Every phone now has a journal. Get quiet in a space. I don't know if it's the first thing you do in the morning or it's the last thing you do at the end of the day. I used to ask myself this question a lot is, what did I do well today? I also used to ask myself, what could be better tomorrow? How do I want to show up tomorrow? Did I make someone smile today? Those seem like very trivial things, but they can improve your life so significantly. And what we're aiming for is change that's deeply transformational, but change that comes in small bits and pieces. This doesn't mean that you're constantly ruminating on things, but you set aside different questions for each day, not the same questions. And then it's important that you don't read these immediately. It's important that you let some time pass in order for you to revisit and see, has anything changed from what I first wrote about this? And you will notice that actually your beliefs, your ideas, your thinking, your feelings, they're constantly changing about different things. But the thing is, we're not taught about that fact, that it's adaptive, that your way of being is always evolving. You do not have to be the same person you were yesterday. You do not even have to be the same person you were 2 minutes ago. But yes, there has to be a bit of consistency in certain values that are, unchangeable. And I believe some of these values should be, joyfulness, love, or kindness, because these are things that are universally great for all of us, that are universally acceptable. And then when you reflect and find things about yourself that you feel you're not okay with, that's also okay. It's not, it's this, the purpose of this exercise is not to make you feel bad about yourself. It's for you to recognize that these things are there. And I would love to change these things about myself, but it's also about accepting that these things are there now. And so if you're not able to change them now, it's okay that you're aware of them first, because what we are not aware of, again, is what we are not aware of cannot be changed. So awareness is the first step. And you can also learn about who you are through self-observation. Self-reflection is different from self-observation. Self-observation has a lot more to do with actions, you know? If you say, oh, I am kind, then you walk down the street and see somebody who's probably parched because of the sun, especially now I'm speaking in Uganda, guys. It's been tough. It's tough out here, but we move. So if what you say about yourself and how you act are not in alignment, this is what creates something that the scientists called cognitive dissonance. Uh, something just came to my mind about someone that I saw talking about cognitive dissonance. But anyway, when you're thinking and your thinking or what you're saying about yourself does not align with your actions, then ideally, again, you're lying to yourself. It's you're not being completely honest with yourself, and you're not showing up as the person that you are pretending or masquerading to be. So self observation is, what am I saying about who I am, and how am I acting in the real world? Are they in alignment with each other? And if they're not, how can we get them to be in alignment with each other? How can we get to that point where what I say and who I reveal myself to be are the same thing and not something that's dual? And in walking in this way, we can then start to really understand who we are. I like what Timothy D. Wilson says in his book, Strangers to Ourselves. He says, we're all strangers to ourselves until we start to take time to understand who we are. And so, self reflection, self observation, that right there is a great start to understanding who you are. And actually, allow me take this moment to shout out Can We Talk? Can We Talk is a company that makes these very beautiful conversational cards for people, either self-healing. They have the self-healing edition. They also have editions for relationships. They have editions for friends, editions for general knowledge. So in that sense, think of it as having conversations with yourself, because there's so many questions that they ask you, and all these things are part of understanding who you are. The tools are just right there with you. You just need to find them and make the time to actually explore these tools. Another way for us to understand who we are, of course, you cannot know who you are just by observing yourself or reflecting. We need other people. We need other people to witness who we are. That's why when you're in a workspace, I've not worked a lot in the corporate industry, but I do know people have something called appraisers. So those appraisals that you have with your employer, it's the same thing, really, when it comes down to it, in understanding who you are. Get a trusted friend, emphasis on trusted friend, companion, actually, trusted colleague. You can also speak to a trusted family member and ask them, who have you observed me to be? Who am I in situations of high stress? Who am I? Who am I when I'm around strangers? Who am I when I'm showing up for my family? Who do you really perceive me to be? What do you think my strengths are? What do you think my weaknesses are? And how do you think I can navigate, this melodrama that we all call my life? So, in understanding that from the perspective of someone else who's observing you, then you have a 360. It's kind of like, okay, I knew these things about myself, but then now I have someone else who's telling me, hey, there's also this aspect of yourself that you've completely neglected. Um, there are things about myself, honestly. There are people who see you before you see yourself. I've had instances in my life, especially in my career, where someone said, I think you would really thrive at doing this. But in my mind, I was like, oh, really? I don't think I'd be able to do that. But that's what having a witness is. And I think this is why people also get married, because at the end of your life, you want someone to have witnessed you and someone to say, he was a good husband, he was a good father, blah, 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 blah. So you need someone to witness your life. And that way we get a 360. So it's no longer centered, the identity is no longer centered in the family that we grew up in or the experiences that we had, because those are also part of those are part of the things that make up who we are, but they're not a complete or holistic way of looking at ourselves. And in working with other people to understand who we are, then we render ourselves vulnerable and open to actually receiving the good and the bad about ourselves, and also just opening ourselves up to new opportunities for growth and development, which is why we are here. The purpose of this is for you to transform on a deeper level. And for you to transform on a deeper level, it has to start with understanding who you are. If you do not know who you are, you do not know where you're going, you do not know how to make decisions, you are constantly stuck in a loop, like I said, and you do not know where you've come from. Because it's also important for us to acknowledge where we've come from. Acknowledging where you've come from also allows you, it allows you to give yourself grace in some cases, you know. Certain people have been through really traumatic experiences in their life before. And so in the evolution of who they are, in the evolution of their being, it's also important to look back and then see, I'm not where I used to be, but this is where I stand today. And that is important. It's important for you to actually acknowledge all the small wins, no matter how tiny or trivial you think that they are. It's so important for you to acknowledge where you've been and where you are and where you would like to go. But be careful not to have an over reliance on the past or to ruminate a lot on the future, because constantly staying in the past or ruminating on the future will keep you from appreciating what's here. And the most important thing is what's here. The important thing, in order for you to like improve the trajectory of your life in any way, you have to pay attention to what's here. Because if you're constantly stuck in the past, maybe your past is something that torments you. So your mind is in a constant loop of negative thinking. And if you're in the future, perhaps you're in a constant loop of anxiety because you do not know what that looks like. Let me tell you something. Anticipating anxiety or anticipating bad things to happen is not going to deter them from happening. I urge you today that you focus on what's here, because what's here is what determines where you will be. What's here is what will help you to actually, peel off all the layers of the things that don't work for you anymore. As an actor, again, relating this back to acting, if someone gives me a script and I do not, like, in any way, my being does not align with anything that's written in the script, it's a script I'm not going to take on. It's a role I'm not going to play because it does not align with certain beliefs that I have, first of all, or or I just don't see how it's going to move me forward in any way. So this is how you should also look at life in some way. I urge you to look at what's here and focus on that. Focus on what's right in front of you. Because if you focus on what's in front of you, then you're able to improve. You're able to develop and empower yourself to be better and to live a better life and to live a life that's true to you and a life that's authentic to your being. And when we have understood what our beliefs are, when we have understood where we're coming from, when we've understood how covering ourselves up limits our being, and also when we've understood, when we've had a 360 kind of understanding of who we are, we then get to this point where you're just like, Trey, tell me, so how is all this beneficial for me? Because it seems like a lot of work. Tell you what, autonomy is one of them. Autonomy is one of the benefits that you will reap from working like this. It's independence of thought and deed. You start to become very self-reliant and confident in who you are. My God, it's so underrated. You don't want to have a kind of confidence that's inflated. I've been there, but hey, we'll talk about that someday. So it's just a confidence that's grounded in your being. Like, you're comfortable with who you are no matter how you are. And you're not afraid to show who you are to other people, because you know what? That is actually really attractive. And you start to think for yourself, and now with the ubiquity of information, we rely on so many things to interpret a lot of things to us. We've stopped thinking. We're not thinking anymore. We're letting other people, we're letting computers, we're letting social media, we're letting a lot of things do the thinking for us. And trust me, now more than ever is when you need to really think for yourself. And so that autonomy, independence of action and deed, is what understanding thyself will do for you. It's you will now recognize, this is where I'm spending my time. This is what I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, that doesn't align who I want to become, So it's more about getting to that point of self-revelation. Think of it, think of understanding thyself as like a genesis. And in order for you to get to the revelation, you have to then have that 360, and in getting the 360 you have autonomy. You know what you want to do. You get really clear about a lot of things. It's you're no longer in like a gray area. You're just doing things because you're grounded in who you are. You know where you're going, you know where you've come from, you know the difficulties that you still have in your life, and yet you're embracing all of them, you know. And in speaking of in speaking of embracing ourselves, it also gives you self-acceptance. Have you ever met people who are wildly chaotic, but in their wild chaos you like them anyway? I'm sure we all have those friends. Well, I personally worked with someone who I thought, wow, you are quite something, you know? But you know what I liked the most about this girl is she was so unapologetically herself. Like, you know, the chaos, and it's not just the chaos. She's a lovely human being, but it's she embraced who she is, the chaos and what other people would deem to be the good things. She has an acceptance of herself, and that then reflects as a confidence still, because I guess maybe she's aware, maybe she's not aware, but for me it came to me as I'm accepting of who I am, you know. I know that these parts of me are probably parts that are deeply flawed and probably that other people in society will not accept, but then I accept myself for who I am. And that's really good, because then if you're showing up in the world in that way, it doesn't make you like it makes you resilient, and it doesn't make it makes it difficult for other people to manipulate you. It makes it difficult for other people to, you know, say things that might, you know, tickle you the wrong way. And so autonomy, self-acceptance, most importantly, um I think of how much you grow when you start to I think of how much you grow on a personal level when you start to understand who you are. Think about how much you will develop on a personal level. You know, so many of us find ourselves in situations where you're like, oh, the days are dragging. Oh, I feel like my work is not yielding. The reason that we feel that way sometimes is because you're expending your energy on things that are not even things for you. You know, it's like you have to have direction of where you're going. I think of I think of life purpose as the other thing that is a result of understanding who you are. Many of us tend to think that what we do, our trade, like what you do for your work, is your purpose. But your purpose is so much deeper than that. Your purpose is your why for existing, for living. I don't even want to say existing, because yes, there's a bunch of people in life who are existing, but not you. The fact that you're here today listening to Refine for the Mind means that you are not one of those people. Your purpose is your why. When you wake up every day, do you think about why you're here? You know, what's your role in the grand scheme of things, in the collective? When you think of the collective, what's your role to this collective that you exist within? What's your role on this universe? And this is something that you can ponder on a lot. And you know, you can start to discover. I mean, it might not come to you immediately, but the more you ask is you start to realize. And sometimes it's not something that's so far out of reach. It's probably something you just haven't paid attention to. But your life purpose, the why you do what you do, and how you want to show up in the world. What's the legacy you want to leave? By leave, I don't mean after you're dead. No. What's the legacy you want to leave today? How do you want to live your life, you know? And in understanding who you are, you will start to understand what your life's purpose is, which is sometimes completely different from you. It's sometimes completely different from your trade. And I also think about how how satisfying your relationships become after you start understanding who you are. In this one has been a big one for me, because I started to see the parts of me that I wasn't paying attention to. Guys, I urge you to have a community. My God, we're living in a society that is, you know, very individualistic now. And there's nothing wrong with you being an individual. I mean, this is why we're doing this. But then you need people. You need a community of people. You need to exist within that collective. So there's individual realization, but there's also you realizing your greater purpose as a part of the collective. So you need, like, in understanding who you are, you'll understand if your relationships are actually working. You know, are you having satisfying relationships? There's no way for you to have relationships that are satisfying if you're not being authentically who you are, because you're not building any deeper relationships if you have to pretend and be a fictional character in front of the people that you love, whether this is your husband or your wife or your workmates. If you're saying that, if your partner is saying I love you, if they're saying that I love you, and the person that the you that they love is the one that you've molded so nicely for them to love, then they don't love you. You know, you have to question the you that they love. So then start showing up as your authentic self, especially in your most close and intimate relationships. You know, the people who love you will love you for who you are, no matter how you are, and they will never make you feel like you're not enough. They will never make you feel like you're too much. They'll never make you feel inadequate. They will make you feel the love, because you know what? We all exist within the light and the darkness of who we are. This idea that someone has to be perfect, that you have to be completely a good person, I don't believe in that. That's hogwash. You can't be completely perfect, and I don't believe that anybody is either completely evil. It's that thing where you have to let your darker side and your light side coexist with each other. And in allowing that to be, is that you recognize, probably I'm mostly in the dark, but now I would like to move to the light. You know, it's you start to chip away at the iceberg, and you're like, I want it to melt. I want to see what's at the bottom, because what you're seeing is usually just the top. But now I want to see what's at the deep level. You know, what's at the deepest level of what I call the unconscious, and how can I make it conscious? You know, now that we've come to the end of this, and you know how important it is to understand who you are, and how you can understand who you are, and what the importance of examining your beliefs is. I also want you to really take time to get quiet inside. We spend so much time taking in things through our sense perceptions. You know, the different sensory doors that you have. You're constantly taking in things through your eyes, you know, through your hands or through your ears. Um, it's time to really go within. And in this moment of now, I just want to take you through a simple breathing exercise that always helps me to just center myself back to the present moment before I even start writing down things, because you cannot write things that are true or things that are grounded in your being if your mind is still racing. And we'll talk a lot about mindfulness. We'll talk a lot about the different kinds of meditation that you can explore. But in order to get any really substantial results and answers, you have to start getting quiet within and stop looking externally for all the answers that you need, because all the answers that you're looking for are within you. You have to start listening to your heart. You have to really start paying attention. This is a revolution about being aware. This is to awaken your awareness. So in this moment, I'm inviting you to sit with everything that we've just talked about, how we came to have our identities, how we can understand who we are, what covering ourselves does to us. I want you to sit quietly if you can. And if you're driving, it's okay. You can always make time and come back and listen to this episode. But I want you to sit quietly. And if you're listening to this, maybe at a time when you're about to go to work, or if you're listening to this while you're about to go to bed, this exercise will help you to go quiet within. It will help you to focus. And it takes just a few minutes, just 5 minutes of your time. In this moment of now, just find a place where you can sit comfortably in an upright position, probably with your feet touching the ground. I want you to inhale as deeply as you can and exhale as deeply as you can. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Now that you have inhaled that deeply, with your eyes closed still, I want you to inhale for 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 4. Let's do this together. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Gently open your eyes. And now, what I want to urge you to do this week is to take time to reflect. Take time to sit with yourself and ask questions, ask better questions. If you have a situation in your life that you feel has been going on for a very long time and you're tired of living within the situation and you're really looking for some answers, then start asking the questions. Start asking better questions to get better answers. You need to ask the question and let whatever comes into your stream of consciousness just flow. You can do this every day for 7 days if you can make the time, or if you can't, even 3 days is okay. And once you've had these answers and you've let your stream of consciousness flow, and you feel like you need to share with the rest of the community about what these questions revealed about you, please feel free to reach out to us on our social media platform on Instagram, Refined for the Mind. Thank you so much for listening or for watching this podcast. My name is Tracy Kawabito, and I look forward to having you here next week on Thursday. These episodes will be dropping every Thursday, so make sure you don't miss out. We're learning, we're growing, we're unlearning, we're healing, and we are developing as beings. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the podcast. See you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day and be happy.